There really is few feelings as cathartic as hurling an enemy full speed into a dozen of his peers and watching them domino against the opposite wall. It's also the biggest damage dealer in this game. Speaking of, I better get to it or this video is going to last longer than the game. No messing around this week. Greetings everyone, this is the protector of the forest, the Hipster Snek. Here to talk about another truly obscure title, one that I myself found completely by chance while browsing Steam's under $10 section, and finding information on this has not exactly been easy. It was released by a team called Edelweiss, I think that's how you say that, but I can find no information on at Comiket80 in 2011. A group I also have no information on, called New Media, picked up the game and got it a Steam and Desera release in 2012. And then cue me stumbling upon it in late 2013 if my original save files at the time are any evidence. Taking place in a fantasy kingdom, specifically the Leda Forest, we take the role of the titular Freesia, a little fairy guardian who battles with a green knife and a lot of kung fu moves to destroy hordes of encroaching monsters and enemies that threaten the peace of the forest. Eventually, we meet representatives of the neighboring kingdom, the Steen the Knight, and Shin, however you say that name, and she's a scientist. Due to the king's demand for this particular stone that keeps the ancient and somehow sentient Jomon tree at the center of the Leda Forest alive, this obviously causes some tensions between the humans and the fairy defender, resulting in many of the game's challenging boss segments. Actually, I want to step aside and talk about this even if it is a little bit spoiler-y. This game actually handles the whole environmentalism as a message thing rather well. It doesn't assert that humans need to eat moss and let nature reclaim the world. Instead, it advocates striking the best balance between civilization and nature, not because they're opposing forces, but because they're two sides of the same coin. This is how you can tell these kinds of stories right, and I found it refreshing that the game, a very pro-industry medium at that, didn't waste my time or my brain cells lecturing me on how consumerism bad. Anyway, getting on with it. Graphically, the game is impressive, especially if this really is indeed an indie dev effort, which I get the impression that it was. The world is rendered in full 3D and the backgrounds alone are worth cost of admission. Freesia and the other characters with speaking roles get really nice portrait work done of them too, and a lot of detail went into them. Personally, I found Steen a bit of a highlight due to how expressive they made him. The animations are smooth and crisp, just like a really impressive effort shown overall. The only thing I have to ding the game on is that the enemies just kinda look like big, dark gumdrop things. Just amorphous blobs that sometimes have mouths or weird noodle appendages. The boss fights are really cool though, and more than make up for this minor gripe. And from an audio standpoint, the game is pretty good. I'm in no hurry to buy the soundtrack, but it is pleasant while I'm playing the game, and for reasons I'll cover in a moment, it really doesn't overstay its welcome at any point. The sound effects are on point too. It adds a certain something to the proceedings to have those really sharp, clear impact sounds when you kick the crap out of one of the gumdrop monsters into their larger, more intimidating family members. And the voiceovers are all done in Japanese, so I assume they're doing their best. It sounds natural as far as I can tell for what that's worth. Overall, a very good aesthetic experience. Alright, let's dissect the gameplay next. The game plays in a series of in-game days, each acting as its own level, each with static platforms as enemies rain in on you, and your mission is to destroy and clear each one. In some missions, there are also gates that, if you stand near them, they'll heal your health over time, and you must protect them as the enemies will try to destroy them, and this will result in a failure of the mission just the same as being knocked out would. Peppered throughout the levels are boss fights, each with their own unique and distinct patterns. Freesia has one button for attacking, which can subsequently be chained together with directional inputs for unique finishing combos, one button for jumping and double jumping, and one button for her unlockable magics, which I find hilariously underpowered, and also one button to hold in order to block. Freesia levels up as the game goes on, and you gather little sparkly bits of mana, acting as currency to buy power-ups and new skills. The thing is though, you can only equip 4 skills and 2 power-ups at any given time. To clarify what I mean, even though you can buy the power-ups, you can only have 2 of them active at a time. There's power-ups for greater HP, higher attack, physical and magical defense respectively, and more. Buying them by themselves is worthless. But here's why. You'll only ever want 2 of these skills. You want Berserker and Hard Turtle. Berserker gives Freesia super armor, or it makes it so she doesn't flinch when she's hit and thus interrupt her attack combos. The latter increases how much she can block before she's thrown into a vulnerable state. See, this game lets you juggle your enemies, and the biggest damage dealer in the game, as I've said, is to hurl one enemy into another, and there's even an upgrade that you can purchase that ups that already considerable damage even further, but the game has no qualms in returning that favor. Freesia does not get Mercy invincibility at any point. If one enemy attack hits, you better believe the next 30 or so will too before you've even hit the ground and a chance to recover. And since additional health and defense will only mitigate that so much, since defense is broken up between physical and magical attacks anyway, relying on them is a crapshoot. You're better off being able to block attacks, which basically reduces all incoming damage to 0 or very close to it, even if Freesia isn't facing her attacker at the time. Thus, seeing the enemy's winds up, which is conveniently forecasted in almost every case, and blocking them is your best defense, since it won't leave you open to the follow-up attacks provided your guard gauge isn't shattered. Being able to just attack without interruption stops a minor love tap from sending Freesia sailing corkscrew style through the air to an ignoble end, where she'll get combo juggled to death. And I am not overstating this mechanic either. I have had otherwise perfect runs suddenly come to a crashing halt when one enemy spat up a magical attack, threw me into the air at the perfect trajectory to get hit by another enemy's magic spit up over and over again to death, having never touched the ground in the process. So remember, Berserker and Hard Turtle are all you need. In terms of equipable skills, however, you're free to customize that to your own playstyle. I prefer relying on melee ranged assaults. They are rather of limited use to me when it comes to the magical ones. But you can set up magical supplements like attacks that shoot from your back to cover enemies trying to sneak up on you, or things like magical barrages to spam enemies with attacks when they're available. Once you got your customization and the 2 power-ups of merit, you then get to run into the other limitation of the game, its own base length. You can clear the game in a 25 in-game day set, or about 3 or 4 hours of trying. While beating the story mode does unlock harder difficulties and Guardian mode, a special challenge mode with rules exclusive to that particular playstyle, it does not stop the fact that Fairy Bloom Freesia is an incredibly short game and thus is priced accordingly. You could probably 100% clear the game and its 50 achievements in one afternoon of dedicated effort. Honestly, apart from challenging yourself, there's nothing to be gained from doing harder difficulties. While the game is quite entertaining and the Guardian mode does shake things up a little bit, it's the same core gameplay found across both. I think a game like this, or a theoretical sequel, could benefit from co-op gameplay modes and perhaps more dynamic level designs. Though it's been over 8 or 9 years now, it doesn't seem we're going to get a follow-up to this title, which is a bit of a shame. For how brief it was, I found myself enjoying it despite all that. I feel a small bit of polish and a little ambition could make this into a really well-loved series of games. But for now, it's just the one title that I can find. Turns out, in researching this episode, there was actually a game that came before Fairy Bloom Freesia, simply titled Fairy Bloom, but I've been unable to locate a playable copy for myself. More on that as it develops. So, with all that said, is the game worth picking up? I'd say yes. You can grab the game on Steam for just $8, or as a 2-pack with another of Edelweiss's games, Ether Vapor, for $11. I'll be honest, I haven't even played Ether Vapor yet, but I've had a few solid hours of entertainment out of Fairy Bloom Freesia, and I definitely got more than $8 worth of entertainment out of it. I think people who enjoy a short, challenging action RPG that plays like an old-school, level-based beat-em-up arcade title probably will too. Yes, I recommend it. Sure, it has its flaws, and yes, it is kind of short, but the game is undeniably charming. It has pretty sharp writing, even though some random characters did have a tendency to not show up properly while I was playing, but whatever. An overall brisk and exciting game feel all the way to the very end. I really enjoyed my time with it, and it's kind of a shame that it's not more popular and well-known than it is. So this has been the Forest Snek, bringing to you a truly obscure gem from out of the heap. If you liked today's video, there's a conveniently corresponding like button you can tap to let me know. And if you want to help the channel grow, be sure to hit the subscribe and bell icons too. If you have a comment letting me know if you've ever heard of this game before today. Did I introduce you to it? And if you want more like this, you can head over to the Tomodachi Bros Podbean and YouTube Mirror channels as well, where my Tomo Bros and I talk about anime, movies, and more. All good stuff. Anyway, join me here every week from our obscure reviews, indie excellence, and more. And I will see you there.